I'm Greg Schechter. I'm an engineering manager with Facebook up in Seattle. We developed the Facebook iOS and Android SDKs up in Seattle. We have a number of our team members in the back here. Ming Lee is going to be presenting after me, and that may be when your post-lunch coma sets in. Right? Right now I'm good because you've got a little while before that kicks in. So this is going to be getting started with the Facebook SDK for Android, and let's get right into it. The key topics we're going to cover are, first, why use the SDK in the first place? Why not just go to the Graph API? Secondly, dig a little deeper into the permission and authentication model for Facebook and using Facebook and the techniques you want to use to have users accept the permissions that you're asking of them. Then we're going to go into building an app, and we're going to spend most of the time of this discussion inside of Eclipse, showing the development of an incremental development of a very simple application. And then finally, round up with key SDK features. And we're going to have a good 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. But if there's something in what I'm talking about that's unclear as I'm going through it, feel free to interrupt me, and I'll try to clarify that. So why use the Facebook SDK for Android? As I mentioned, there's the Graph API, and you currently link the Facebook SDK into your application. So, and that's fully open source, and everything being done through the SDK can be done publicly. So what's the value of using the SDK? Well, one is it simplifies the session authentication model quite a bit. The users logging in, logging out, caching access tokens, dealing with the different mechanisms for authentication that I'll talk about shortly are all greatly simplified. Another big reason is that there's native UI control support. So yeah, you can go and make a Graph API request to get all your friends, but then you got to do something with that. So we provide idiomatic native user interface controls that do common things like display friends, allow you to pick a place, allow you to log in, and whatnot. And these have a bunch of optimizations that are typical to many apps that want these things. And that also offers, and it's worth diving into, mobile apps are unique relative to web apps in that they don't update all the time. You can take your web app, if something underneath you changed, you can update that web app and deploy it immediately. For mobile apps, not the case. You've got your own internal lifecycle. You've got the Android marketplace acceptance lifecycle, and you've got the user update lifecycle. So it takes a while to get stuff out into users' hands. So we want to provide relatively stable versioning so that the dependencies you take upon the SDK and upon these controls can be maintained over time. Improved API support. An example of this is batching requests. So being able to take a number of independent Facebook requests and throw them all into a single HTTP request and get their results back. That's, again, made easier through the SDK. Mobile app install ads were mentioned in the keynote session and beyond a couple sessions this morning. The SDK makes the attribution process for determining whether an app has been installed very simple. And you get that out of the box or through calling a function, which is very important in order for the mobile app install product to work so that you can be charged on so advertisers can be charged on a per install basis rather than a per click or a CPM basis. But we need feedback from the application to sort of complete that cycle, and the SDK helps with that as well. So roughly, here's a rough block diagram of what the SDK looks like. At the base is the session. The session is really the key element that is used and the key class that is used in order to do authentication, do user login, log out, cache access tokens, and whatnot. Facebook activity is a subclass of fragment activity that if your hierarchy allows for it, you can build your main activity off of, and that eases the development process considerably. All of which can be done in session, but if you're able to use it, all the better. And request and response are really the workhorses for Facebook integration. They're what abstract out the generation of the Facebook request out to the server and the response back and put all the data into it. Now that data is, at this request response level, is JSON style data. And this next layer, the graph layer, is a facade on top of that that's really a strongly typed facade that provides structure to what comes back from response or what gets sent in from request. A graph user object, for instance, encapsulates the notion of a Facebook user, a graph place, a Facebook place, et cetera. And on top of that is a set of native UI. I talked about that a few minutes ago, about some of the benefits of that. Here's a few examples: Friend Picker and Place Picker fragments, and the login button that we'll see helps with individual logon if you want to take on that UI. There's another one that I don't mention here, login activity, that's used as well for deeper login experiences. And a profile picture view for showing your user's profile picture. So permission authentication, this can be a subtle topic. It's really important that when you request information from your users and you request permissions from your users to integrate with Facebook, that you do so very thoughtfully. So in particular, you don't want to ask for all permissions that you can possibly get and ever want to use from your users, because they'll just say no, and you just won't get any of the permissions that you're looking for. So you want to start off small, ask for basic permissions, and then incrementally, as your app proceeds, ask for more permissions when the user is deeper into the application, when they understand what these permissions are going to be used for. We find that these choices make a dramatic impact on the percentage of users who accept the permission request for your app, and thus allow your app to integrate or not integrate with Facebook for them. The user experience for authentication is also important to understand, because it differs depending on the user and the user's configuration. In particular, it differs based upon whether or not they have the Facebook for Android app installed on their device or not. If they do have the Facebook for Android app installed, then it acts as a proxy. So let's see. No, let's go back there. The Facebook for Android app acts as a proxy. And when I'm requesting a permission, the SDK, in the app process, will make a intent invocation to the Facebook for Android app, which will cause that to pop up, cause it to make a round trip with the server, with the Facebook server to determine whether or not that permission has been granted for this app. If it has, send back an access token. And that access token will then be communicated back to the app process. The app process will then make subsequent requests using that access token, and it also cache it away. So that subsequently, when the same app is invoked, it needn't make this request of FP for Android at all. It can just use the cached access token. Furthermore, there's ability in the SDK to refresh your tokens. So tokens are generally valid for 60 days. But every time your user visits the app, we go and make at least every day, we go and make a request back to the server to refresh the token. So your app user will not be asked to refresh, to re-log in or re-authenticate as long as they've used the app in the last 60 days. So this is the case with the Facebook for Android application, presuming it's installed for the user. If the user does not have that installed, they're going to hit, for that first scenario that I mentioned, when they log on, they're being requested a permission, they're going to hit something that looks like this, which is an in-browser instance of a Facebook login screen. And you're going to have to provide credentials. Users are going to have to provide credentials to this. And when they do that, again, a connection is made to the server from within the app process, comes back with a user access token. Again, that access token is cached, so this doesn't need to be gone through again for each time that the user uses this app for this given permission. It'll still be cached. But when a new permission is requested or a new set of permissions are requested, this has to be gone through again. So there's much less friction when there is the Facebook for Android application installed, but still, this is a perfectly viable means too, particularly since the token is cached and reused on subsequent instances. So now let's start jumping into code a bit, and here's the app we're gonna build here, which has a simple login screen. So it has a login button with my profile picture and a greeting on it, and then below the opportunity to pick a friend and pick a place. In this case, I've got Chris Lane. Chris, wave your hand. That's Chris. He's got those glasses, apparently. And I picked Facebook Seattle in this case, and it gives you the opportunity to publish that to your feed as a Graph API publish. When you do that, it'll pop up a little bit of toast that will say the status update has succeeded with that ID. This is absolutely built for explainability, clearly not for beauty, and also not for completeness. There's more stuff that you need to do, obviously, for a real app than what you're going to see here in the course of 45 minutes. So in order to build this app, we're going to divide this up into 3 stages. The first is just the login and session. the button that says log out, the greeting, and my profile picture. We're going to start with that. That's going to use these highlighted components. The session we're going to derive from Facebook activity. We're going to use a graph user to represent me as the user that's logging in. And the UI elements that we're going to use are login button and profile picture. So the first piece of this, before we get into Eclipse, is what we do with the app dashboard on Facebook. So let's go and build an app on Facebook. So here I'm at the app dashboard, developers.facebook.com/apps. Forget about this, just happens to be the app that I'm on right now. But I'm going to create a new app. This app, we're going to call Hello Android. And I'm going to attempt to get that CAPTCHA in there. And presumably I got it right because it's taking a while. There we go. Yep. So I got this. And the important thing to know, so now there's a new app as far as Facebook is concerned that you've just created. The important thing to note here is the app ID, which we're going to use, we're going to embed in the app. The app secret we're not going to use. The app secret is used for server-to-server communications, which this is not, and you really do want to keep this secret and not distribute it out with your apps. So in this case, we're not using it since we're building an Android app. And we're going to come down here to native Android app, click on that, and enter some information. So the package name that we're using is com.hello Facebook, hello Android. And the main activity, the main launching activity is com.helloandroid.MainActivity. Now down here is an important element that we're going to have to get right. I'm just going to copy and paste something that you're not likely able to see right now, but you will in a moment. So that key hash that I just popped in there is unique to this machine. It's key tool generated, and it represents the unique hash for this machine. Developers on Android for Android apps are going to need to create a hash for each machine that they're developing on and add it to this list, as well as the machine that the release build is built upon. The reason for all of this is that this information is stored on Facebook's back end, and when an app goes to authenticate through the mechanisms that I talked about, the information from the app itself is sent down to the device. To the servers. And a check is made against these characteristics to ensure that the app is indeed who it says it is. And if it is, then we send the app access tokens back, assuming it's been authenticated by the user and everything. So I do that. I also enable Facebook login through this, save changes. And I now have an Android app that's able to be used. It says it's going to take several minutes to propagate, so we actually won't use this app. We'll use one that I've already cooked up earlier. So now let's go to Eclipse and start off with the manifest for this Android app. So the important things to note, obviously we need internet permission for all of this. We have a main activity that we're going to build off of, and this is our launching activity. This is just standard Android stuff. Items to notice down here are this line here, the com.facebook SDK application ID. Piece of metadata is going to be set to the app ID that we just pulled out of the dev app dashboard. And this login activity that we need for certain scenarios in which authentication is interrupted. So that's just boilerplate that you throw into pretty much every app. But this guy here, if we go to strings.xml resources, we see that the app ID, presumably the app ID that we just created, but it's actually a different one, is right there as a resource, and the app name is in here as well. We've got a few other resources that we're going to use throughout this discussion in here as well. So now let's take a look at our main UI layout, and all we have in this particular case is 3 separate layouts that are being included here. Those 3 separate layouts we're just going to swap in back and forth between these as we go. The important one here is really this profile group. And what profile group is overall, the master layout for this is a linear layout, and it's got a login button. This is our native login button control referenced through layout. And it's just a standard, it derives from button. We're going to name this one login button. And then we've got a linear layout below it that has a text view to be treated as our greeting and our profile picture view. This is our native profile picture viewer. to be called Profile Picture View. And that's it. I've got a bunch of other stuff which is all going to be invisible for our first iteration through this. So popping over to MainActivity, this first portion that we're doing is really quite straightforward. We derive from Facebook activity, and this gives us various session callback facilities that if we can, like I mentioned earlier, if we can derive from that, it's a good thing to be able to do. If we can't, we could have built all of this helper stuff off of session directly, which is also quite reasonable to do. But in this case, we can for the sample app. We derive from Facebook activity. We override the onCreate method, do standard stuff like call its parent onCreate, and also set the content view to the XML layout. And then we're just going to dive into the 3 different sections of this. So the second 2 being commented out for now. And the first one is just setting up the login button profile pick, which we see down here. So set up login button profile pick. All we're doing is grabbing it out of the XML layout, the login button. And because it's a derivation of button and it's specifically for login, we've provided a set user info changed callback that derives from this class here and provides an on user info fetched override callback to invoke. That's invoked anytime the login button results in changing the user, the currently logged in user, to the session. And it's invoked with the new user or null if this has been a log out. So in this case, we just stash away that user in a instance variable that we have, and then update our profile UI. Update profile UI is very straightforward. Just grabs 3 UI elements, the greeting, the profile picture, no, 2 UI elements, the greeting, the profile picture, and sets the profile picture to be square view. We're going to show this as a square. And now we're grabbing the session off of the static session class member. Get active session is going to give us back the current active session. And it's considered valid if it's not null and it's open. So if it is valid and we have a user, we're going to go and set the profile picture's user ID. It just takes a Facebook user ID to the user ID of that graph user that we retrieved, that strongly typed graph user that got sent into the callback that we saw earlier. And then set the text to hello, the user's first name. Otherwise, we're going to set both of those to null. And that's really all there is to it for this. Now, you'll see I didn't request any permissions for this, and that means that we're going to start off with just basic permissions. So can we switch to, great. All right, so let's run this. Okay, so here's Hello Android. We've got a login button, we've got a greeting which has no text in it, so you can't see anything, and we've got a profile picture view. The profile picture view has the default anonymous profile in there, the anonymous silhouette. That's how its initial view is. So I'm going to click login. Okay, so login. And I do have Facebook for Android application on this device. So what we see is that image that I showed earlier today, earlier in the talk, with the Facebook for Android permission dialog. So all I have to do is click login. Facebook for Android already knows who I am. We've transitioned to it. Actually, it shows here that it's looking for, in particular, Greg Schechter. So it knows who I am. And I'm going to go ahead and log in through this. So that waiting, what it was doing was communicating back to Facebook, coming back, and then coming back to the app that we're building here. It shows my name, it shows my profile picture, and I can go and click log out here, and I'm gone. And I can click log in, and this time there was a very short pause, but then we're logged in directly again. We don't need to go reauthorize this app. So if I had not used the app between now and 60 days from now, yes, I would have had to reauthorize it. If I had used it any time in between, it would happen transparently. So that's the first part of this. Let's switch back over to the screen here, and let's come back and call setup FriendPlace Picker. So first thing we're going to do that, other than uncomment that line, is go back to our layout and take a look at what we've got going on here. We already saw these two. We also have a table row. The next thing we're going to do is insert a table row into this, which had been invisible. We're going to make it visible. And that table row consists of two of the following. A vertical linear layout with a button, a profile view, and a text view. Profile picture view and a text view. So that button is pick your friends, picture of your friend, name of your friend. Pick a place, picture of the place, name of the place. So that's all these things are, all the way down to almost the end of this. And we're going to go back over to MainActivity, where we're going to talk through Friend Picker and Place Picker and how this works. This is considerably more code than the last we saw, but it's quite straightforward. So we've got some UI elements, some views, profile, places, and friends view, and the picker fragments that we're using. These are derived from fragment. We've got a friend picker fragment and a place picker fragment that we're going to have as member variables in this class. We're going to center our place picker around the Facebook Seattle office at this lat long. Obviously, for a real app, you would use real location functionality. We haven't done so here because of talking primarily about the Facebook integration. So first thing we're going to do is set up our UI elements, just pull them out of the layout. And we're going to instantiate our pickers through this idiom, this fragment usage idiom, where we're going to get the fragment manager, begin a transaction on that, find the fragment for the picker, and then later for the place, the friend, and later for the place. And if it doesn't yet exist, if it hasn't been serialized into there, we're going to create a new set of arguments. In this case, the argument that we're going to place in here is the title for this, which is just going to be pick a friend. And we're going to instantiate the friend picker fragment with that set of arguments and add that to the transaction that will result in instantiating the UI. We do the exact same thing with a place picker. We find it. If it's not yet serialized out to that chunk of layout, we create one by first setting a set of arguments showing that we're not going to show the search box on the place picker. It does have a search box option. And again, set the title to pick a place. Instantiate the place picker, and then add that into the transaction again and commit that transaction. So now we've added those into the UI. For the friend picker, we're going to now initialize that and instantiate it. Well, we've already instantiated, but we're going to initialize this appropriately. We're going to set the user ID of the friend picker to me. That says that I'm looking for my friends. That's and my being the logged in user. So we're looking for the friends of the logged in user. We're not going to allow multi-select in this particular case. And then when the selection changes, when a selection has been made and a change has been made to the onSelection, to the friend picker fragment, then we'll go ahead. We've overridden this this listener, and the onSelection changed method of that will be called. And then I'll go back to this in just a second. So we're setting up that onSelection change listener. We're going to set a onDone button click listener as well. And that's basically our entire configuration for the friend picker fragment. So when the selection does change, what do? We go and grab the selection out of the friend picker, and you see here that it's a strongly typed list of graph users. So you don't worry about parsing. You don't worry about parsing out the JSON representations of these friends or dealing with the JSON array. It's a strongly typed list, and we're going to find. Oh, these got strangely indented. Similarly, we're going to find the friend picture view and the chosen friend just out of the layout. Again, set this to square. And if our selection is non-empty, we're going to go and grab that graph user as the initial head of that list. Get its ID, get the name, and set the user ID on the friend picture view, and having set the text. Otherwise, we're going to set those to empty. Then we're going to call a function that says make only visible. So it's going to hide everything and make the argument that we pass in visible. So we've selected our friend. We want to make our overall profile view visible, the UI that we've looked at in the layout. That's what we want to make visible after we've done a selection. And we want to do the same thing if you click the Done button. We just want to make that profile view visible. So let's skip over the place picker for a moment and just see the hookup of that friend picker. The friend picker, now we got to find the friend picker button, set up that button's listener, and when it's clicked, ask the friend picker to load its data and then show the friend view. Make everything else invisible, will show the friend view. When someone selects something on the friend view, this will get invoked and will make the profile view visible again. Place picker is really the same model as what we just saw. We're going to set the location to the Facebook Seattle location. That's where our search is going to be centered. And again, as the selection changes, we're going to pull out what the selection is, grab the UI elements, the place and the picture, the chosen place and the picture for that place. And depending on the selection, whether the selection has been made or not, we'll either set it to that selection, set the ID and the name to that selection, or set them to empty. And again, when we're done, make only the profile visible. And same model for hooking up the place picker button. We're just going to swap. We're going to load the data for the place picker fragment and then show that fragment view. And this is that make only visible function I talked about. Hide all the things that we know about and make the passed-in argument visible. So let's run this extension. Okay, so we see the new UI elements here that pick friend, pick place, and the profile picture below it. Profile picture is below it. We're still logged in as me. I'm going to go ahead and click on pick friend, and we see very quickly a native UI representation of a friend picker pop up. It's populated with profile pictures, and I can scroll. This is very strong, good performance scrolling, and you can see as we're going back and forth, they're filling in with users. Now, this set of users is cached as well as the profile pictures are cached as well. So if I go and visit this again, we'll see much quicker fill-in. It'll be pulling out from the cache on the device rather than from the net. So I picked Andrew Rothbart, just sort of coincidentally. How about that? Okay. And now pick place. Same model. We're centered on Facebook Seattle, as we saw here at that lat long, and these other places are at that lat long as well. And this, again, just starts filling in the different places at that lat long and going out in a radius from there. So I can say Facebook Seattle, and there we go for this section of the app. Now, switching back to the code, last thing we need to add into here is our publish to feed button to show how we're going to publish it to the feed. This had been set to gone. Again, I'm going to set it to visible. And going back to MainActivity, here's what this button is going to do. So we grab the button out of the layout. We set up OnClickListener. The OnClickListener has an OnClick method to override. And first we check to make sure that both friend and place have been chosen. If they haven't, we'll do an alert. If they have, go ahead and grab the session. And if the session, assuming the session is set, we're going to get their permission. We're going to determine whether or not their permissions contains publish actions, which means that the publish actions permission has already been granted for this application. And if it has, great, we can go ahead and post our status update, and we're ready to go. If it hasn't, as it hasn't been in this case, we haven't authorized publishing in this particular case. If it hasn't, then we're going to do a few things. First, we're going to set a local variable that we've added here, pending status update, a chunk of state, to true, saying that we're going to have to do a status update at some later point. Establish a set of permissions we're going to ask for, and then build up a reauthorization request. This reauthorization request says for this activity and this permissions, we're going to want to reauthorize this activity for this additional set of permissions, and call reauthorize for publish. Now, the way this works is when reauthorize for publish gets called, it again proxies through the Facebook for Android app or puts up the in-browser UI. It's clearly an asynchronous method from the flow of control of the app. And does its round trip with the server, gets the appropriate session token back if it's been accepted, And in this case, calls on this Facebook activity class that we're derived from, calls a method called onSessionStateChange on the Facebook activity class. OnSessionStateChange gets the new session state, however that state transition has occurred, as well as any potential exception. So we go ahead and call up through the parent, pass those through to the parent, and check to see whether or not the state is opened and the token has been updated. So if it's opened and the token has been updated, then we've got a valid session, and the token just got updated to reflect the new permissions that we asked for. So if that's the case, and we're pending a status update, then we need to go ahead and do our status update. So we're going to post the status update now, again, in a synchronous manner at this point. So post status update, now the synchronous version of post status update will set up a message posting to my feed. That's going to be our message out to the feed. And build up a request. So this request is a specialized request designed for new status updates specifically. So we're going to call request new status update, pass in the session, pass in the message, and a callback to invoke when this status update has been completed and the response comes back from Facebook. So when it does, we get this response coming back. We get a potential exception coming back. We check to see whether that exception is not null. If it's not null, we say that the update failed, and here's the error that it failed with. Otherwise, we grab the strongly typed graph object out of this response, which is going to have an ID in it. And that ID is going to represent the ID of the post that was just made to Facebook. So we'll create a message that says that. And then we'll alert with that message. The alert is just down here, and it's just a simple toast invocation for the app. So now we have a request that embeds the callback in it as well. And we're going to actually go ahead and make the request now, issue the request. We do so by creating a set of additional parameters as a bundle. And we're going to do two things in this bundle. We're going to tag the chosen friend in that. And we're going to tag the chosen place as a place in there. We set the parameters on that request. And we go ahead and call request execute batch async, which goes ahead and does its thing. The SDK handles directing any potential response back to this callback, and we're done with the post at that point. So let's run that. And now we see the additional publish to feed button here, and I can pick a friend. Oh, another feature I didn't show of the friend picker is the ability to scroll down in this manner, in an index manner. And let's see. I'll pick Joe Cipher, who's right there. And I'll pick, let's see, FB Seattle Cafe, Bits and Bytes. So now when I click Publish to my feed, I have not authorized this for feed publishing. Oh, here's what I didn't do. Want to switch back to the code real quickly? I didn't comment this back in. So we saw that the UI showed up because I did uncommented properly in the XML, but it wasn't actually hooked up. So trying again. Joe doesn't get chosen this time. Facebook Seattle, and I'm going to click Publish to my feed. So here we see another similar login button, but now it's asking, it says the app, saying that the app may post on your behalf, including status updates, photos, and more, and who can see this post. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, accept that. And the on-session state change is being invoked at this point. The feed publication is happening, and then we see that toast showing the ID of the update that just occurred. So that's a very simple app, basically, that does a number of Facebook interactions that many apps are going to want to do that integrate with the Facebook Android SDK. So can we switch back? Yeah. And we saw that the first section of this used these set of components for showing using Facebook activity and session to display the original profile picture and login button. The second section did this, used graph user and graph place, strongly typed objects, and the native UI for friend and place picker, as well as the profile picture view again. And the last part, use all the ones at the bottom, use the session, use on-session state changes, comes from Facebook activity, and explicit use of request and response also, and the graph object for pulling the data out of the response in a strongly typed manner. So those are really the key features of the SDK. We're going to see when Ming speaks next, he's going to talk in more detail specifically about Open Graph and Open Graph integration and what that provides and how that's done through the SDK. So we saw session and request and how those are used here, and graph user is a strongly typed facade atop this. Native UI, we saw the different native UI elements in here. We didn't see login fragment, which is used for creating more complex login flows but still providing the mechanisms, the login callback mechanisms that you really need to use. One of the things we didn't talk about here, which is very important, is anybody using the 2.0 version of the SDK in this room? Okay, great. So we have explicitly added legacy support for Android SDK 2.0. And what that means is that when you install the 3.x SDK, it's source code compatible with the 2.x API and SDK. So you can just compile and run and deploy with the 3.x API SDK. But you can also start incrementally adding features from the 3.x SDK because these are interoperable in the sense that from the Facebook objects in the 2.0 SDK, you can pull a session object, and vice versa. If you have a session object, you can pull out a 2.x compatible Facebook object. So this gives you an incremental path for adoption of new SDK features in a pretty smooth way. And there's also publish install, which is worth a shout out as well here, because this is what is used for reporting installations on your installs for for optimizing mobile install advertisements. So in particular, this will get called intrinsically by using sessions, but you can also call it directly for at app startup, for instance, when your user isn't necessarily establishing a Facebook session. So publish install can be called to ping back to Facebook that an install has occurred, and that can be used for ad tracking, and not ad tracking, for app install tracking purposes. So these are the resources available for the Android SDK. Primarily the first one, developers.facebook.com/Android, is really the central place where all these resources, you get the SDK, and all the reference documents come from as well. Thank you.